Hey everyone, What If Fan here, bringing you another exciting part of What If Fishing System in Food Wars World. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name on my Patreon page. Make sure to check it out and show them some love. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 161, Toriko's Severed Arm, the Crude Reviver Yasaku. The blue butterflies would land on areas with minor injuries or sickness, while the red ones would flock to severe wounds. If both colors landed on you? Congratulations, your life was about to end. Though a number of butterflies fluttered around Yuki, none of them landed. It was clear his body was in perfect condition, a fact he already knew himself. His body's self-healing capabilities were frighteningly powerful, and since coming to this world, he had hardly ever been injured, a benefit of knowing the plot. Would avoiding danger like this lead to a lack of combat experience down the line? Impossible. Combat experience wasn't built on getting injured. Yuki's gourmet cells had an adaptation ability that was simply too strong. This didn't just apply to adapting to external environments, but also to various combat situations. Even Knocking Master Jiro had called his adaptive power terrifying. The combat experience others needed countless battles to accumulate, Yuki could master in just one or two encounters. And now, his gourmet cells had evolved once again. This growth was even more horrifying than a simple cell activation. He had no need to worry about combat experience. After the butterflies dispersed, Yuki entered the land of healing, life. Besides the numerous sick and injured, there were also plenty of healthy people who had come here as tourists. In the original story, Sunny was a frequent visitor, coming for beauty treatments. This place was a paradise for anyone who loved beauty. Yuki was interested in some of the treatments, like the cactus doctor's acupuncture. But when he went to try it, he failed. The reason was simple. His base defense was too high. His skin was so durable that not even their needles could pierce it. This was something other gourmet cell users didn't have. They could raise their body's defense to an absurd level during combat, but in a normal state, their defense wasn't particularly strong. But because of his growth-type gourmet cells, Yuki's physical defense was terrifyingly high even when he wasn't in a battle stance. So much so that he couldn't even get acupuncture. He could only sigh helplessly at this, but it wasn't a bad thing. It gave him an advantage in a fight. He wouldn't have to worry too much about being ambushed. Chef Yuki. As he was strolling through the land of healing, a voice suddenly called out. Yuki turned and saw Sunny. Isn't it Sunny? Long time no see. Yuki greeted him. Sunny was also very respectful towards him. After all, the strength Yuki had displayed before was formidable. He had one-shot a GT Robo of that level, and afterward, he had been willing to share the jewel meat with them. Even if Yuki had taken all of it for himself, they wouldn't have said a word. If he hadn't gone with them, forget the jewel meat, it was a question whether they could have even kept their lives. Yuki had saved their lives. That life-saving grace was something they couldn't forget. So, his respect for Yuki stemmed not only from his strength but also from his gratitude. Long time no see, Chef Yuki. I didn't expect you to come to the land of healing. Are you injured? Sunny couldn't help but ask. In his mind, the most likely reason for Yuki to be here was an injury. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come. As for sickness, people with gourmet cells simply didn't get sick. Not at all. My body is perfectly fine. I came here to visit the Reviver Yasaku. Yuki explained. The Reviver Yasaku? Chef Yuki, you're here to see him too? Sunny was surprised. He hadn't expected Yuki to also be looking for him. He himself was here to get information on a certain ingredient. That's right. I'm very interested in the techniques of a reviver, so I asked Granny Setsuno to help me inquire about it. I plan to study here for a while. Yuki didn't hide the reason for his visit. His words made Sunny's eyes go wide. Forget the fact that he was using Granny Setsuno's connections to contact Yusaku, just Yuki's absurd ability to learn was mind-boggling. He had seen Yuki in action. He was a powerful chef, a powerful gourmet hunter, and his proficiency in knocking was frighteningly high. For such a super talented individual to be only a teenager, not even 20 years old. And now he was going to learn the techniques of a reviver. This made Sunny's head spin. He had once been called a genius, but now, compared to Yuki, he finally knew what a real genius was. As expected of Chef Yuki. To be a master of all trades, and now to even have the energy to focus on reviver techniques. I'm in awe. Sunny's admiration was completely genuine. Well, let's not talk about that. Since you're also here to see Yusaku, let's go together. He's very famous in the land of healing. Sunny said. Yusaku's reputation was immense, and he had already found out that he was here. Let's go together then. Yuki nodded. The two of them then walked towards the motherwood in the center of the land of healing. This tree was the headquarters of the revivers, known as the motherwood, and also as the healing tree. The revivers usually studied various knowledge and techniques here, revived all sorts of plants and animals, and accepted various commissions. However, just as Yuki and Sunny reached the stairs, they saw a few familiar figures. Toriko? Komatsu? Sunny recognized them in the crowd. Besides Toriko and Komatsu, Teppei was also there, as were members of the Gourmet Knights and the Gourmet Mafia. Yuki was also taken aback. The reason was simple: the century soup had already appeared ahead of schedule, which meant they wouldn't be going to the ice hell. But the problem now was that this group had still run into each other, and they had all appeared in the land of healing. And most critically, Toriko's arm was missing, just like in the original story. Yo, it's Sunny and Chef Yuki. What are you guys doing here? Toriko greeted them. I should be the one asking that question. What happened to your arm? Why is it missing? Sunny's good mood vanished. He wasn't a reviver, but he knew that even for them, reviving an entire arm was no easy task. For Toriko to have lost an arm, it was hard to imagine what had happened. Well, I ran into the Gourmet Corp by Chef Tamirad while capturing an ingredient in the wild. We fought, and this is what happened. Toriko said with a helpless sigh. If he could have, he wouldn't have wanted to lose an arm, but it was clearly out of his control. This battle had also shown him just how strong a Gourmet Corp by Chef was. He was no match for him at all. In the end, if Teppei hadn't saved him, he would have died. And the Tamirad he had fought hadn't even been going all out. It was only when facing Teppei that he had released his Parasite Emperor. But unfortunately for him, he had run into Teppei. In the end, the Parasite Emperor was knocked by Teppei, and Tamirad himself was captured and thrown into prison. At that time, all of Tamirad's nutrients had been drained by the Parasite Emperor, leaving him with no power to resist. If Teppei hadn't saved him, he would have died. And who are these people? Sunny looked at the others. Them? We met them on the road. Toriko explained. Takemaro had been searching for ingredients to save Imaro and had run into the Gourmet Mafia. They had then run into members of the Gourmet Corp. But they were lucky, the members they faced weren't very strong, so they had escaped with their lives. Since Toriko and Takemaro knew each other, the group had ended up coming to find Yusaku together. Another one of the four heavenly kings, but he's clearly different from Zebra. Seeing Sunny, the boss of the Gourmet Mafia was also alarmed. Their situation wasn't great right now. Their own boss had been recruited by Ichiryu into Biotope 0th. Without their powerful leader, survival had become much more difficult. Though they were called the Gourmet Mafia, they had always been helping the poor. Their methods were just similar to the mafia's, their characters were quite good. Their leader was covered in scars, a result of provoking Zebra in the past. But at that time, Zebra hadn't gone for the kill. Otherwise, he wouldn't have just been seriously injured. Chef Yuki, you're finally here. Master has been waiting for you for a while. Hearing the name, Teppei realized that Yuki was the one who was here to study under Yusaku. Though he found it a bit absurd for a chef to be learning reviver techniques, since it was Granny Setsuno's request, he would naturally comply. Teppei, you know Chef Yuki too? Seeing that Teppei recognized him, Toriko was a bit surprised. Of course, I do. After all, Teppei was a real chatterbox, and he couldn't keep unimportant information to himself. So, he directly told everyone that Yuki was here to learn reviver techniques. Is this Chef Yuki the same one who created the century soup with Granny Setsuno? Takemaru recognized the name as well. You must be from the Gourmet Nights, right? I'm actually quite interested in you guys. I might pay you a visit later, Yuki said with a smile. He hadn't forgotten about the ultimate routine. Hearing this, Takemaru nodded quickly. The Gourmet Nights were few in number. To survive peacefully, they needed to build good relationships with others. For a great chef like Yuki to visit them would be wonderful. The Gourmet Nights were a very special group, like a band of ascetic monks. Even though they had gourmet cells, they didn't indulge in feasting like others. They rarely ate, at most having some simple food. Yuki could never learn to live like that. But it also meant that the remaining Gourmet Knights all had incredibly firm wills. Soon, the group arrived inside the Motherwood. It had been modified by the revivers, so as soon as they entered, they felt their bodies and minds relax completely. Yusaku's revival workshop was massive. After all, he was a super reviver on par with Mohai and Seishai. So, his workshop was naturally one of the largest. When they found it, Yusaku was right there, researching how to revive various extinct plants and animals. Isn't it Teppei? You're finally back. And you brought so many people this time. These injuries are quite serious. Yusaku glanced over and immediately noticed Toriko and the laid-out members of the Gourmet Mafia. I'm back, master. Right, let me introduce you. Teppei then introduced Toriko and the others to Yusaku. Yuki? You're Yuki. You're finally here. I was just saying, if you didn't come soon, I was going to leave. Hearing the name, Yusaku jumped up directly. After all, this was a task from Granny Setsuno. Chapter 162, The Walking Medicine. Yusaku, a helpless sonny. Yusaku was a man who didn't much like to follow the rules. Of course, the rules he broke were only of two types, the unimportant ones, and the ones he believed were wrong. So, he gave off a very rough impression, which was why his public image was so poor. Though Yuki didn't exactly like his personality, he didn't dislike it either. He did think Yusaku's abilities were quite strong. Upon learning of Yuki's arrival, Yusaku let out a sigh of relief. After all, teaching him was a task assigned by Granny Setsuno, and Yusaku, who feared nothing in the world, was most afraid of her. Who knew how she had punished him in the past to instill such a degree of fear? My apologies, Mr. Yusaku. I went to the Gourmet Pyramid first, so I was delayed. Yuki explained the reason. It wasn't that he had intentionally stalled, he had been at a critical moment in improving his culinary skills and had temporarily forgotten about this matter. The Gourmet Pyramid. You really went to a place like that? Right, you're the one Granny Setsuno sent. How could you be weak? Hearing that Yuki had gone to the Gourmet Pyramid, Yusaku's eyes lit up. In the human world, the Gourmet Pyramid was an extremely dangerous area. To be able to go there and return safely meant that one had basically reached the peak of what the human world had to offer. The Gourmet Pyramid? Chef Yuki, you went there? I've heard of it. It's said to be very dangerous, but it seems to have some very good ingredients. Toriko said. Not just him, but the others had also heard the legends. In the human world, the Gourmet Pyramid was known as one of the 7 gourmet wonders. Its danger level could be imagined. In the Gourmet Pyramid, there's an ingredient called melocola. If all goes well, you'll go there eventually. I've already left the method for capturing it there. You'll know how to do it when you see it. Yuki said with a smile. Toriko and Zebra would inevitably go there. There was no harm in telling them now that he had left the method, they would see it when they arrived anyway. Mellow cola? I'll remember that. Toriko nodded. He knew now wasn't the time to be thinking about ingredients. The most important thing was to heal his injuries. Alright, enough talk. Let's get to the treatment. These little guy's injuries are quite severe. But it's not a problem. Resuscitation shock. Yusaku didn't waste any more words. He tossed the members of the Gourmet Mafia into the air and then used a wave of resuscitation shock. This move, Yuki could clearly see, was a knocking technique. With it, the bandages on the three of them were completely removed, and the unconscious men were instantly awakened, their faces contorted in pain. Yusaku's movements looked incredibly rough, but in Yuki's eyes, there was no problem. The places he struck were all precise pressure points. It was crude, but with a fine touch. The three conscious men didn't even have time to react before they were thrown into a therapy tulip. This thing could heal many injuries in just 10 minutes. But it also had a very peculiar characteristic: if a person who was only unconscious or uninjured entered, they would be eaten by the tulip. But as long as the person was injured, they wouldn't be eaten. It was a very good medicinal plant. Next, Yuki and the others watched as Yusaku spit on the other people. That's right, spit healing. Yusaku had modified his own body. Forget his saliva, even a drop of his blood had strong healing properties. But if saliva could solve the problem, he certainly wasn't going to bleed himself. So gross. Seeing this, the color drained from Sunny's face. It couldn't be helped, he was a man who loved beauty. Seeing Yusaku's methods made his face turn grim. If Sunny had to experience that, he would probably rather die. Alright, you're next. Toriko, your arm is a serious problem. To recover, it will take at least 20 years. Yusaku said. His words stunned everyone present except for Yuki and Teppei. Komatsu was also baffled. The century soup had already been made, and he hadn't gone to the ice hell this time, so he wasn't in a hurry to leave. But to hear that it would take 20 years, he was completely floored. 20 years is pretty good. After all, Toriko has gourmet cells. You know, he's missing an entire arm. To regrow it from nothing isn't so simple. Yusaku rolled his eyes. Though stronger gourmet cells meant stronger recovery ability, Toriko's weren't at a level where he could revive a severed arm. But Yuki knew that this guy was one of the protagonists of this world. The red demon inside him had helped him recover his body more than once. In the original story, it was because of the red demon that his arm had instantly recovered. And later, during his battle with Star June, he was already on the verge of death, but when the red demon came out, it not only seriously injured Star June but also repaired Toriko's injuries. It was just that Toriko himself was so beaten down after the war that he fell into a depression, only going to find Komatsu after some time and encouragement from others. It's actually going to take 20 years to recover. Sunny was also helpless. But he had to be treated, he couldn't just leave it be. So, Toriko could only accept Yusaku's treatment. In that case, Toriko will stay here for treatment. As for you, Yuki, you can learn the basics with Teppei first. His reviver skills are quite good. There's no problem with learning from him at the beginning. Though Setsuno had told him that Yuki's learning ability was terrifying, in Yusaku's view, no matter how terrifying, he couldn't possibly learn all the basic knowledge in one day. He would have Yuki learn with Teppei first. After he finished Toriko's initial treatment, he would have time to teach him. In that case, Chef Yuki, you can study with me for this period. Teppei didn't refuse. He had heard from Setsuno and Jiro just how formidable Yuki was. He had even heard that his knocking proficiency had already surpassed his own. In that case, he could also exchange knocking techniques with Yuki while teaching him. So, he was quite happy to build a good relationship with him. Finally, you. Your name is Sunny, right? One of the 4 heavenly kings. You look very healthy. What are you here for? Yusaku looked at Sunny. He was the only one left. In his eyes, Sunny was perfectly healthy, with no problems at all. So Yusaku was a bit curious as to why he was here. I came to find you for information on a certain ingredient. It's said that only you know about it. Sunny said, his face turning very serious. Information on a certain ingredient? And only I know? Kid, you're not trying to ask about Earth, are you? Hearing Sunny's words, Yusaku thought for a moment and guessed what he wanted to ask. Earth? You mean the dessert from Acacia's full-course menu? Hearing this, the others were shocked. They never thought Sunny would ask about such an ingredient, let alone that Yusaku would know about it. This was Acacia's full-course menu. Acacia was the gourmet god. If they could taste such a food, they would have no regrets. That's right, Earth. So you really do know. Sunny's face lit up with delight. Though he had heard that only Yusaku knew the information, he had come here just to try his luck. He never thought Yusaku actually knew. I do know about Earth. But I'm not going to tell you. Seeing Sunny's delighted expression, Yusaku directly poured a basin of cold water on him. Why? Sunny was completely baffled. Kid, you don't think you can get information about an ingredient just by asking, do you? You know, Acacia's full-course menu is an extremely precious ingredient. Even for information on a normal ingredient, you have to pay. You're not trying to get it for free, are you? Yusaku shook his head and said. I see. I understand. Then name your price. What will it take for you to give me the information on Earth? Sunny asked. The price I would name, you can't afford. An ingredient like Earth lives in the gourmet world, and even there, it's extremely precious. Yusaku shook his head. He was actually bluffing. Sunny wanted to know the information, the IGO had records of it. He wasn't telling him now because Sunny hadn't grown up yet. Getting this information now would only have a negative effect on him. So, Yusaku had made up an excuse not to tell him. But what he said was also true. If you wanted information on an ingredient, you naturally had to pay. For a super high-level ingredient like Earth, the price would naturally be even greater. Sunny couldn't afford the price. Damn it! Hearing this, Sunny was also helpless. Because what Yusaku said was right, he couldn't afford the price. But he didn't want to just give up. So, under the pretext of taking care of Toriko, he decided to stay for a while. He hoped to find a chance to get the information from Yusaku. Afterward, to avoid embarrassment, Sunny also told his sister Rin what had happened. Rin immediately rushed over after receiving the news. With her there, Sunny was a bit more relaxed and began to scheme how to get the information. As for Yuki, he followed Teppei to a massive library, also built within the Motherwood. This is where all the various techniques and basic theories of the revivers are stored. Besides a few special techniques, you can find the vast majority of reviver skills here. Teppei said. These materials were contributed by all the revivers because the profession was too small. If everyone kept their secrets to themselves, the community would never grow. To avoid this, some powerful revivers in the past had taken the lead in establishing this place, contributing the vast majority of their materials. Besides a few of their ultimate trump cards, they had contributed everything else. Because of this, anyone who wanted to become a reviver could come here to study. But the barrier to entry for the profession was a bit too high, so many who came to study gave up after a while. Slowly, this library became quiet. Only occasionally would someone interested in being a reviver come here to study. Of course, because the collection here was so rich, some revivers would also come here to look up various materials. After bringing Yuki over, Teppei quickly moved between the various bookshelves, occasionally pulling out a book. In the end, he came to Yuki with over 20 thick books. Though you're very strong in cooking, Chef Yuki, this isn't a test of your culinary skills. These are the basics of the reviver profession. You'll need to spend some time memorizing all of this. Teppei said. And these materials didn't even include the specific details of various ingredients. If those were added, it would be truly terrifying. But Yuki had already memorized the characteristics of various creatures long ago. As for these books, though they looked thick, and it would probably take a normal person several months just to read them, let alone understand their meaning. But for Yuki, it was different. He could easily memorize the contents of the books and analyze them clearly. He estimated he could finish them all in less than a day. Chapter 163, The Reviver's Art, A New Use for Life Energy. A full day passed. Yusaku was still working on the very first step of reviving Toriko's arm. But to his surprise, Teppei and Yuki had already returned from the library. "How are you two back after just one day?" Yusaku was taken aback. Logically, Yuki should have spent a significant amount of time in the library. Even though Granny Setsuno had stressed that his talent was terrifying, Yusaku figured it would still take him some time to master that much knowledge. But here they were, back after barely a full day. For a moment, he even wondered if Yuki had found the reviver's art unsuitable for him and simply given up. "Master, maybe you should let me handle Toriko's regeneration. While my skills aren't as good as yours, I can still manage limb regeneration. I think you should be the one to teach Chef Yuki," Teppei said, his face stiff, his expression strange. "Let me teach him? What in the world is going on, Teppei?" Seeing him like this, Yusaku couldn't help but ask. Something must have happened for Teppei to be acting this way. How do I even describe it? Chef Yuki's learning speed is too fast. He mastered all the basics in just a few short hours. After that, I taught him everything I knew. He only needed to see it once, whether it was theory or practical application. So, it's better if you teach him, Master. I feel like if I keep teaching him, I'll run out of things to teach in a few days. Teppei explained, the shock of what he'd witnessed still fresh. That learning speed, it was just too absurd. In truth, there were still many reviving techniques and a wealth of knowledge he hadn't taught Yuki. It wasn't because he wanted to hold anything back, it was because he had been so utterly demoralized. He remembered his own childhood, traveling with Knocking Master Jiro. It was seeing him in action that had inspired him to become a reviver. He had spent countless years to become the famous master he was today. All that time and effort, and then he saw Yuki. That one day of teaching had nearly shattered his own resolve. So, he had no choice but to come to Yusaku. He was afraid that if he kept teaching, he would be so demoralized by Yuki that he'd never recover. Is he really that ridiculous? Yusaku's eyes went wide. Toriko, as a layman, wouldn't understand what this meant. But as a superclass reviver, Yusaku knew better than anyone. At this moment, even he began to question reality. He didn't think Teppei would lie about something like this. He knew his apprentice well. Though a bit of a chatterbox, Teppei was very reliable. In the original story, Teppei had pretended to be brainwashed, infiltrated the NEO organization to gather intelligence, and had ultimately been the one to rescue Komatsu from inside. His plan had been incredibly risky, but he had done it anyway. It was just that his actions hadn't had a huge impact in the end. The NEO organization hadn't posed too great a threat to Toriko and the others. And their leader, Joie, had been utterly crushed by Minoura. It really is that ridiculous. Anyway, Master, you'll know once you teach him for a while. Teppei shook his head. Yusaku nodded, and the two of them swapped tasks. He would teach Yuki, and Teppei would handle the regeneration of Toriko's arm. After taking over, it didn't take long for Yusaku to discover Yuki's unreal talent for himself. That learning speed, he had never seen anything like it. It was completely absurd. In the end, it took only 1 week for Yuki to drain all of Yusaku's theoretical knowledge. Now, all he lacked was practical experience in revival. So, Yusaku took out everything that needed reviving and let Yuki try his hand at it. The result? Yuki's success rate was an unheard of 100%. How is that possible? Just how high is your food luck, kid? Not a single failure. Yusaku was dumbfounded. The revival of these plants and animals was not a guaranteed success. Some were so ancient that even he and Mohian Sheishai weren't certain they could revive them. Simply put, there was a probability of failure, a probability that wasn't affected by their skill but was purely an issue with the subject of revival itself. But even with that, Yuki had managed to succeed every single time. It made Yusaku think of food luck. That was the only thing that could explain this. My food luck isn't that high. The reason I can succeed every time is because of a type of life energy I control. Yuki explained. It was something he had discovered while reviving these creatures. Life energy was very special, it could increase the lifespan of others. And by injecting a certain amount during revival, it could also raise the success rate to its absolute maximum. Life energy? What's that? Yusaku couldn't help but ask. It's a technique from my appetite demon. Whether it's humans or other plants and animals, they all need life energy to survive. The simplest example is a human's lifespan. My ability can directly draw out the lifespan of other creatures and bestow it upon others. Yuki explains simply. He could just blame it on his appetite demon. It didn't matter that he didn't have one. Lifespan? Hearing this, Yusaku fell silent. He had never imagined that someone could freely manipulate lifespan. That ability is truly frightening. But you'd better not use it recklessly. Yusaku could imagine what would happen if Yuki used this ability without restraint. The scene would be one of absolute horror. Rest assured. I know how powerful this ability is. The lifespans I've drawn so far have only been from scumbags in various plants and animals. Yuki explained that life energy was universal, so there was no problem with the sources he chose. Hearing this, Yusaku breathed a sigh of relief. Having spent this time with Yuki, he had gotten a sense of what kind of person he was. In short, he wasn't some bleeding heart do-gooder, but he was definitely not evil. He leaned towards the side of justice. Yuki was a person with a bottom line, so there was no issue. But Yusaku was also reminded of another colleague, a fellow member of Biotope 0th, Kasaru. That guy could absorb the calories of others. In a sense, Yuki and Kasaru, one absorbed the HP bar, the other the MP bar. But comparing the two, Yuki's ability to drain the HP bar was scarier. After all, if your MP was gone, you could replenish it. But if your HP was gone, you couldn't get it back. And Yuki wasn't just draining the HP bar, he was draining the maximum HP, which was the most frightening part. Come to think of it, your ability seems like it was born for the reviver profession. It's incredible. Though Yusaku knew that appetite demon abilities came in all shapes and sizes, this was the first time he had heard of such a terrifying one. Absorbing lifespan. Just thinking about it sent a chill down his spine. At this moment, he was also glad that this ability belonged to Yuki. If it were in the hands of someone from the Gourmet Corp who knew what kind of chaos would ensue. By the way, Yusaku-sensei, there's one more thing I'd like to ask your advice on. Yuki changed the subject. Yusaku's interest was piqued. Yuki had already learned almost everything he knew, but now he still had a question. He was very curious about what it could be. It's like this. I learned some knocking techniques from knocking master Jiro before. Among them, the damage knocking technique can seal the damage received inside the body and transfer a part of it outside. But the damage sealed inside the body remains forever. So I was thinking, could I? Yuki told Yusaku about his idea of fusing damage knocking with food immersion. He had already had some ideas before, but making progress wasn't easy. Now, he had discovered that the techniques of a reviver seemed to be useful, which was why he was asking Yusaku. The damage knocking technique wasn't exactly a secret. Many people knew of its effects because Jiro and Acacia had used it frequently in the past. They weren't worried about others figuring out how to counter it because only they themselves knew where its weakness was. Only Yuki, as the new prospective knocking master, had been told the location of this fatal flaw. Otherwise, it was equivalent to a mortal wound. Damage knocking. I've heard of it, but I don't know how to use it. I do know food immersion. It can only temporarily store calories. If you merge them as you say, complementing each other, then. At this moment, Yasaka's brain was also working at high speed, considering the feasibility of merging these techniques. It does seem feasible to merge them. But the cost of trial and error is too high. Yasaka shook his head. The damage accumulated by damage knocking didn't just disappear, it was always there. And when it was released, you couldn't let it out bit by bit, it had to be released all at once. This accumulated damage was fatal. If it were all released, the result would be the same as what happened to Jiro, instant death. So, the cost of experimenting with this technique was too high. And to complete such a technique required a large number of trials. Anyone who wanted to master this technique needed to have reached high-level knocking proficiency. In the world today, you could count the number of people who had reached that level on one hand. So, in Yasaka's view, it wasn't very practical. I've only just learned this technique, so I haven't accumulated much energy. That's why I want to experiment on myself. But I'll need your help, Yasaka-sensei. Yuki explained. Others wouldn't dare to release this technique, but he did. After all, he had barely used it. That's right. Your abilities are horrifying. There shouldn't be any problem with you giving it a try. Hearing this, Yusako's eyes lit up. The two of them then began their research. Just like that, Yuki stayed with Yasaku for several months. Toriko's arm had also grown a prototype. This speed once again shocked Yasaku and Teppei. After all, they had originally estimated it would take 20 years. But at this rate, it would probably be fully recovered in just 1 or 2. Of course, what shocked Yasaku most was still Yuki. His experience was constantly accumulating, which led Yasaku to have no choice but to go and find the reviver, Pukin, and borrow all of Mohian Sheishai's hidden books. These materials were also quickly digested by Yuki. And the fusion of food immersion and damage knocking had also yielded some results. According to their previous expectations, after the fusion, food immersion could permanently store energy. As for damage knocking, the energy would gradually dissipate like with food immersion. Both of these characteristics were successfully achieved, but food immersion was more complete, while damage knocking had some minor flaws. Food immersion could now permanently store energy. As the technique was perfected, the amount it could store would also continuously increase. But damage knocking was different. After fusing with the characteristics of food immersion, the damage received would gradually dissipate, ensuring the body wouldn't be harmed. But to ensure the body wasn't harmed, the rate of dissipation was too slow. Based on the amount of damage stored in Jiro's body, if he were to let it dissipate slowly, it would probably take a lifetime. So, it had to be accelerated. But if it was accelerated, the end result would be the body starting to break down. However, Yuki had also found a way to compensate for this: the life energy he controlled. Life energy could quickly replenish the body's deficits. He had now also learned the various healing techniques of a reviver. Through these techniques, he could use life energy more efficiently. At that time, not only could he increase lifespan, but he could also heal rapidly. To ensure there were no problems, Yuki and Yasaku decided to test it on someone. That someone was Toriko. After all, with Yuki's control over life energy, there would be no problem. Injecting it into Toriko would only be beneficial. Even if his injuries didn't recover, the benefits wouldn't be small. That was why they had decided to experiment on him. After all, no matter how they failed, there would be no side effects. And Yuki and Yasaku had also discussed it with Toriko. Since there's no harm, let's give it a try. I don't want to lie here for 20 years. After learning of this, Toriko agreed without a second thought. For him, a matter with no risk and only benefits, it would be strange if he didn't agree. Chapter 164, A Natural-Born Reviver, Damage Knocking Perfected. Using the techniques of a reviver to precisely control the life energy, they restricted its flow, making it only act on the injured area. A section of Toriko's arm had already grown back, but it would still take a considerable amount of time to be fully restored. After Yuki injected his life energy, directing it solely to the arm, everyone watched as it began to grow at a visible rate. In less than half a minute, Toriko's arm went from a prototype to a complete, fully formed limb. It's really recovered. So fast. Toriko himself was stunned. He never thought that after just a short period of study, Yuki could make his arm grow back so perfectly. Toriko, check your arm. Is there anything different about it? Yusaku reminded him. They needed feedback from Toriko to know if the newly grown arm was the same as the original. Nothing different. No, wait, it feels even stronger than my original arm. This is amazing. Toriko clenched his fist. Hearing this, Yusaku nodded. It was clear that Yuki had succeeded this time. Not only had Toriko's arm grown back, but most critically, it was even stronger than before. This meant that Yuki's life energy seemed to have a strengthening effect. The only question was how strong that effect was. Congratulations! Your life energy can restore a person's body, not just increase their lifespan and make them young again. Yusaku said. This is all thanks to your teaching, Yusaku-sensei. The various techniques of a reviver and my life energy are indeed a perfect match. Yuki said. He was truly grateful to Yusaku. After all, the man had genuinely taught him everything. This once again made him experience the feeling of having a great tree to shelter under. With Granny Setsuno as his backer, learning these things, Jiro didn't hold back, and neither did Yusaku. For anyone else, learning these things wouldn't be so easy. Even without my teaching, you would have surpassed us on your own eventually. It's hard to imagine how a freak of nature like you exists in this world. Yusaku couldn't help but complain. After spending this time together, he not only saw what kind of person Yuki was, but he also knew just how unreal he was. In terms of cooking, he was already on par with Granny Setsuno. As for his strength, though his cell level wasn't very high, his true combat power was immense. In this world, there were many who could possess a combat power that greatly surpassed their cell level. But the greater the transcendence, the higher their combat realm. In the battles of the late game, while cell level was also important, what was truly critical were combat techniques. After all, cell level could be temporarily broken through in the late stages. Midoriya himself was an example. His appetite constantly improved his strength, continuously breaking through limits. So, in the late game, cell level could only be used as a reference, not as the deciding factor. Culinary skill, cell level, and now the milk style of sharpening. Yusaku truly didn't expect that Yuki was also a master sharpener. It had to be said, he had truly seen it all. Yuki's performance had completely shattered his worldview. He finally understood why Granny Setsuno had emphasized that Yuki's learning ability was strong. This wasn't just strong, this was completely inhuman. Since the experiment was a success, I'll contact Granny Setsuno first. Yuki said. He had solved Granny Setsuno's lifespan problem long ago. Now, the most critical issue was knocking Master Jiro. Jiro had sealed too much power using damage knocking, so now he had to release it. Though it would undoubtedly be released in the final battle, Yuki had also managed to do one more thing. Change the location of the fatal weak point. But to change the location, he first had to release the damage stored in the body. Otherwise, changing it rashly would cause the sealed damage to erupt directly. Yuki was now very curious. What would Acacia's reaction be when he next encountered Jiro and found that the damage knocking technique was no longer effective? But he also didn't want Jiro to just go and die. In the original story, Jiro hadn't eaten those ingredients, yet he had fought the Nitro to such a state. Among the three great powers, it seemed their strength was really ranked according to their names. If Jiro had eaten a few of the ingredients, it was hard to imagine what level his strength would reach. The same went for Ichiryu. If he hadn't been removed from the story, facing him, Acacia probably wouldn't have been able to stir up any trouble. Ichiryu's strength combined with Dawn Slime was not something Neo and Acacia could compare to. Soon, Yuki contacted Granny Setsuno. Though he also wanted to contact Jiro directly, when Jiro was out and about, others could rarely get through to him. Only Setsuno's calls would be answered immediately. So, he had no choice but to find her first. Alright, I understand. I'll tell Jiro right now. After hearing Yuki's description, Setsuno hung up without another word and began to contact Jiro. She knew the situation with his damage knocking. Jiro had used this technique in the past when fighting the Wolf King, Guinness. It could be said that because this technique was so useful, he had accumulated too much damage in his body. This was equivalent to creating a weakness for himself. But at the time, only he and Acacia knew of this weakness. With Jiro's understanding of Acacia, he felt Acacia wouldn't use this move against him. And later, Acacia had faked his death, so Jiro had continued to use this technique frequently. In these 500 years, he had roamed the gourmet world quite a bit, sealing a lot of damage in his body. This was why he had accumulated enough power to destroy several Earths. That damage wasn't just from the blue nitro. After all, in the final battle, the number of attacks that hit him wasn't many. Though the power of those moves was immense, they weren't enough to destroy the Earth. The damage on Jiro's body was mostly accumulated over these hundreds of years. Though this damage wouldn't erupt, it was a hidden danger. Setsuno knew this well, but there was no way to reverse it. Jiro himself was also very clear. If this power were released, he would die without a doubt. So, since he was going to die anyway, he didn't care. Setsu, is something wrong? Sure enough, Jiro answered almost instantly after she called. Jiro, come to the land of healing. I'll be there too. That kid Yuki has found a way to solve the problem of the accumulated damage from damage knocking. Setsuno directly stated her purpose. The moment she spoke, Jiro, who had been half drunk, instantly sobered up. For Jiro, no matter what kind of liquor it was impossible for him to get drunk. The reason he got drunk was that he suppressed his body's ability to break down alcohol. Otherwise, with his constitution, no alcohol would have any effect. Ichiryu was the same. The reason he was a lightweight was because he never broke down the alcohol in his body. Realizing the importance of damage knocking, Jiro naturally broke down the alcohol directly. Though he himself didn't care much, damage knocking was always a ticking time bomb. No one knew when it would go off. Now that there was a way to solve it, it was naturally for the best. As for whether this was a false alarm, Jiro didn't even consider it. These were Setsuno's words, which meant Yuki had told her. So, it couldn't possibly be a false alarm. He knew Yuki's character very well. He would never say anything he wasn't sure of. After breaking down the alcohol in his body, Jiro also set off for the land of healing with a single step. As for Yuki's camping monster, he had already prepared it. But it was similar to the watermelon octopus type, it still needed some time to mature. So he planned to bring it to Yuki after it was ready. He never thought Yuki would give him such a big surprise now. Though it felt like the debt he owed was only getting bigger, now was not the time to talk about such things. With their speed, Setsuno and Jiro both traveled on their own. This time, Setsuno didn't even bring her camping monster, which showed just how anxious she was. While everyone was waiting, Yusaku saw a pink streak of light rush in through the window. Long time no see, Yusaku. And Teppei, Toriko. Setsuno rushed in and greeted Yusaku. But at this moment, Yusaku, Teppei, and Toriko were all stunned. Because the person standing in front of them also had pink hair, but it wasn't the standard mushroom cut. And the person in front of them wasn't a little old lady, her voice wasn't aged either. Who are you? Yusaku finally asked. HM? You don't even recognize me. Setsuno, who had been wondering why they didn't recognize her, suddenly realized that she was in her youthful state. She would dispel the knocking and return to her youthful state when she returned to her diner. She would only use knocking as a disguise when she went out. This time, she had been in too much of a hurry and had forgotten to use it. So what's going on? Your granny Setsuno? Why are you so young? Yusaku was completely baffled. Yasako-sensei, do you remember the effects of life energy? I helped Ms. Setsuno increase her lifespan, so she has now returned to her youthful state. Yuki explained. Yasako, Teppei, and Toriko finally came to their senses. I see. So this is the effect of life energy on lifespan. Just as Yasaku was marveling, a sharp blow suddenly landed on his head. The intense pain made him clutch his head. It had to be said, Setsuno's control over this strike was incredibly precise. It caused him intense pain without injuring him, and the force didn't affect the environment. Otherwise, a blow strong enough to make Yasaku feel pain would have reduced the mother tree to non-existence. The entire land of healing might have been turned into a wasteland. Granny Setsuno, why did you hit me? Yasaku was also very puzzled. When he was young, he was often disciplined by her because he didn't like to follow the rules. He never thought he would be disciplined again now. But he was also puzzled he shouldn't have provoked her recently. The address, Master. The address. Just as Yasaku asked this question, Teppei couldn't help but remind him from the side. If you wanted to say who knew Setsuno and Jiro best, it would undoubtedly be him. So, he saw at a glance why she had hit Yasaku. This guy was really asking for it. He had called her granny right to her face. It would have been fine before, but now, she was in her youthful state. Didn't he hear Yuki call her Ms. earlier? Teppei was helpless. It had to be said, his master's head was really too straight. The address? I understand. Ms. Setsuno, it's my fault. Yasaku, finally reacting, immediately submitted and admitted his mistake. What a sight! I come in to see Setsa disciplining Yasaku. Jiro also arrived at this moment, just in time to see the scene. Master Jiro. Seeing him, Yasaku also quickly greeted him. He was no stranger to the muscular, middle-aged Jiro. He had seen him in the gourmet world before. The members of Biotope Zero Th all knew that Jiro had multiple forms. Yuki, my boy, I didn't expect you to find a way to solve the damage knocking problem so soon after we separated. By the way, I've already prepared your camping monster. It just needs a few more months to mature. Jiro said. A camping monster? Hearing this, Yuki was also pleasantly surprised. He knew there were some in the human world, but they couldn't survive in the gourmet world. So he had planned to find one after he entered the gourmet world later. He never thought Jiro had already prepared one for him. Since it was prepared by Jiro, it naturally couldn't be weak. Thinking of this, Yuki's anticipation was maxed out. Chapter 165, Yuki's Camping Monster, the damage stored by knocking Master Jiro. Didn't you say you were looking for a camping monster? The ones in the human world are too weak for you, and you're not heading to the gourmet world just yet, so I took a trip for you. There aren't many that fit your requirements. The one I've prepared for you, you could say Ichiria had a hand in it too. Jiro said with a grin. What kind of camping monster would require President Ichiryu's help? Yuki was baffled. He couldn't even begin to guess what it could be. The one I got for you is on the 6th continent. You know a lot about the gourmet world, right? Then you must know about the 7 beasts of the 6th continent. Jiro nodded, bringing up the legendary creatures. I know a little. The Whale King Moon of the 6th continent stays in its deepest regions. The continent is usually managed by the 7 beasts, a bit like the system on the 7th continent. Yuki confirmed. While he didn't know much about the other continents besides 6, 7, and 8, the 7 beasts were a major part of the original story's plot. The 6th and 7th continents were similar. The Monkey King and the Whale King didn't manage their lands directly, leaving it to other creatures. The Monkey King had entrusted the management of the 7th continent to a few master-level monkeys. As for the 6th continent, it was managed by the 7 beasts. The rumor was that the 7 beasts and the Whale King Moon managed it together, as if they were rivals. But in reality, the 7 beasts were the Whale King's subordinates. The ruler of each continent was, without question, the strongest being on that land. If there were even a hint of dissent, the 8 kings wouldn't be able to hold their positions. On the 6th continent, though the Whale King didn't involve itself in daily affairs, it was still the king. So, the 7 beasts were undoubtedly its subjects. The 7 beasts were very special creatures. Their bodies contained a unique material that was immune to the erosion of time. The golden chef, Gigi, had used this material to forge the golden cookware. This was the key to preparing another. After all, preparing another took 600,000 years. No other cooking utensil could withstand such a long period of continuous cooking. Though the flow of time in the world of souls was different from the outside world, time was not frozen there. Both the golden cookware and the souls within would slowly be worn away by the passage of time. Many of the souls who entered the world of souls, though they eventually revived by stealing another's body, had forgotten who they were, and even why they wanted to be revived. Asaruti was the best example. He had wanted to be revived because of a promise to his lover, but after his revival, he had forgotten who he was and his purpose. The golden material, however, was not subject to the erosion of time. Unless it was violently destroyed, it would basically not be damaged. Honestly, Yuki was even tempted to try incorporating the golden material into his own knife. After all, though his knife was made of incredibly strong material, it would still be eroded by time. That's right. Your camping monster this time is related to the 7 beasts. I asked Ichiria to contact some people on the 6th continent. He has some good connections over there. In the end, we asked a very special guy to use one of the 7 beasts, the giant shell, to nurture a smaller version for you. The giant shell is a perfect camping monster. Not only is it amphibious and can fly, but it also has super strong defensive capabilities. When it's ready, it will be the best camping monster for you. After Jiro's explanation, it all clicked for Yuki. He immediately remembered the magnetic lamp from the original story, which had carried Toriko and the others into space. That was a juvenile giant shell. Its ability to do so showed just how powerful the species was. The giant shell, one of the 7 beasts, had an area of over 10 million square kilometers. Its size was immense, and its young also had tremendous potential. It was indeed the most suitable camping monster for him. Thank you so much, Master Jiro, Yuki said with deep gratitude. A camping monster like this was undoubtedly the best. Now he also understood why Ichiria had to get involved. To nurture such a special camping monster, you had to get Gigi to do it. He was a master in this field. But getting Gigi to act was not something just anyone could do. With Ichiryu asking, he would definitely agree. After all, the name Gigi had been given to him by Ichiryu. Ichiryu had a powerful ability to inspire others. When he met the 3 flavor sages back then, he had given each of them a name and had established a deep friendship. That was why in the original story, the 3 flavor sages had helped Toriko and the others so unstintingly, even at the cost of their own lives. Though the main reason was their feud with the Blue Nitro, Ichiryu was also a key factor. With Ichiryu's help, Gigi had naturally agreed to nurture the camping monster. We're the ones who should be thanking you. Setsu and I have also received a lot of favors from you. Jiro shook his head. Theirs was a relationship of mutual benefit. Setsuno also smiled and nodded. Building a good relationship with Yuki was definitely one of the best decisions she had ever made. Let's stop thanking each other and get down to business, Yuki said with a laugh. He knew how important the things he had given them were, and they were constantly repaying him. You're right. Let's get to it. Jiro's problem is the most critical. Setsuno nodded. The issue with Jiro's body had always been a great worry for her. Hearing this, Yuki and Yasaku explained the technique they had researched and their plan. In short, we'll use this technique to release the damage stored in his body. I'll help Master Jiro accelerate the release. During this process, his body will be constantly injured, but I'll inject a large amount of life energy. After Yuki told them the plan, both of them were thoroughly amazed. You actually fused the techniques of damage knocking and food immersion, you're a true genius. You know, the effects of food immersion can only be maintained temporarily, which is why everyone uses it right before a big battle. Setsuno was astonished. Food immersion, while useful, had its drawbacks. Its effectiveness depended on how much time the user had to prepare. Take Chin Chin Chin. Though he had foreseen the coming battle and sensed the crisis, he had had too little time for food immersion. And he had held back when fighting Granny Chio, which was why he had been seriously injured. If the effects of food immersion could be made permanent, then there would be no need for advanced preparation. One could always be in their peak state. I came up with the technique by accident. It'll be easy for Master Jiro to learn since he knows both skills. For anyone else, they would need to raise their knocking proficiency to a high level to learn it. Yuki explained that it would be incredibly simple for Jiro to learn this move. After all, he was a master of both techniques. So there's such a condition for others to learn it. Hearing this, Setsuno was speechless. The number of people in this world who could reach a high level of knocking proficiency could be counted on one hand. It had to be said, this technique was truly difficult to learn. Actually, it can be learned separately. After all, many people have mastered food immersion. So, if they only learn that side of the technique, the difficulty will be much lower. Of course, in return, because the difficulty is much lower, the only effect after learning it will be the permanent accumulation of energy. The ability to gradually release physical damage from damage knocking will be gone. Yuki explains simply. Very few people could learn the full version of this technique, so the abridged version was enough. That's not a problem. After all, the only people who have mastered damage knocking now are you, Jiro, and Acacia-sensei. Setsuno shook her head. Just the permanent accumulation of energy from food immersion was already ridiculous enough. That's an incredible thing, but what's food immersion? Toriko asked with confusion. He hadn't even come into contact with Food Honor yet, so he had no idea what they were talking about. It's a very special technique. Simply put, it can raise the upper limit of the calories in your body, though only temporarily. But I didn't expect Chef Yuki and Master to come up with a way to permanently raise the limit. Teppei was also very shocked. He had learned Food Honor and had reached the Master level, and he had also learned food immersion. That was why he could easily capture Zebra and throw him in prison. Because he knew what food immersion was, he was all the more shocked. Then what's damage knocking? A special knocking technique? Toriko asked again. The term had come up repeatedly in their conversation, but he and Sunny still didn't know what it was. It's a very special type of knocking. When you're attacked, you can use it to directly seal most of the damage inside your body, so it doesn't affect you. As for the remaining small part, it's separated and directed outside, affecting the environment. Teppei explains simply. What? Isn't that invincible? Hearing this, Sunny exclaimed. Toriko nodded quickly beside him. No matter how you looked at it, this move was completely unreal. It's not that simple. You know the effect of this move, so you should also know that it's very difficult to learn. You heard just now, only 3 people in the world know it. Forget the difficulty of learning it, the damage accumulated in the body can be released. If someone knows the location where the damage is stored and has also mastered this move, they can use knocking to undo the seal. Once the damage that has been stored for a long time accumulates and erupts, even the strongest person will die. Teppei explained that there was no such thing as an invincible move, everything came with a price. He dared to tell them now, on one hand, because neither of them knew this move or its weak point. On the other hand, after today, all the damage on Jiro's body would be released, so there was no need to worry about him being threatened anymore. Otherwise, no matter how much of a chatterbox Teppei was, he would never casually reveal Jiro's weakness. Even so, this move is still unreal. A pity the learning difficulty is too high. Only 3 people have learned it. To think that in the entire world, with so many people who knew knocking, only Yuki, Jiro, and the gourmet god Acacia knew this move. Sunny couldn't help but shake his head. As they were talking, Yuki and the others had already begun. he started to teach Jiro the technique. With Jiro's ability and his complete mastery of both component skills, his learning speed was bound to be fast. And sure enough, about 3 hours later, Jiro had successfully mastered the move. The damage in his body was now constantly dissipating outwards. The release speed was very slow because it couldn't harm his body. But the surrounding environment couldn't take such a beating. Helpless, the group had no choice but to move to the wilderness. Though the released damage wouldn't directly affect the earth, it wouldn't just disappear into thin air either. It would still erupt outside the body. If they continued to stay in the land of healing, it would have been completely destroyed. It really is constantly dissipating, and I don't have to worry about my body. But the speed is a bit too slow. Who knows how long it will take for all this damage to be released? Jiro also knew the power of this move, but the release speed was too slow. He was well aware of how much damage he had accumulated in his body. At this rate, it would truly take until the cows came home. Next, I'll accelerate the process. So you need to be ready, Yuki said. Chapter 166, An Unsealed Master Jiro, A Terrifying Power. Wait a minute. Let me undo my seals first. At my full strength, my body can withstand more damage. Jiro suddenly stopped Yuki. Undo your seals? Hearing this, Yuki suddenly remembered that Jiro still had a number of seals on him. These seals had been placed on him by Acacia when they first met. After all, the Jiro of that time was incredibly wild. In the past, he had a name, Jiro the Rampaging Beast. He had been raised by the Wolf King, Guinness, so his body was filled with the wildness of a wolf. On top of that, he had eaten a large amount of red nitro. Eating them had caused his cells to perfectly fuse with his gourmet cells, turning him into a living appetite demon. Both his combat power and his personality were incredibly fierce, and he couldn't even control his own strength. When Acacia saw this, he had directly used knocking to seal him. He then took him as a student and taught him knocking techniques and the ways of humanity. After all, no matter what, Jiro was still a human. Though he had learned knocking and could now control his power, he still kept the seals. Now, since he was going to release the damage in his body, it was naturally better to undo them. That way, his body could withstand more power. That's right. I have seals on me that teacher Acacia put on. Though I've learned knocking and can undo them myself, I won't undo them unless necessary. With that, Jiro began to force the nails out of his body. As they fell, his appearance underwent a substantial change. It could be said that at this moment, he was transforming into something non-human. His head grew larger, his mouth sprouted sharp fangs, and his eyes became pure white. The Jiro of now was a complete monster. Hiss, what did he turn into? Seeing this, everyone except for Setsuno and Yuki, including Yasaku, couldn't help but suck in a cold breath. After all, only Setsuno knew about this. Yuki only knew because he had read the original story. Anyone seeing this for the first time would definitely be scared. After all, the Jiro of now no longer looked human. Though he was still humanoid, he had absolutely no connection to a human. Ting, ting. As more nails were forced out and fell to the ground, Jiro's appearance became even more terrifying. The meridians on his body seemed to grow outside his skin, and his hands turned into sharp claws. Don't worry, this is a normal process. Jiro's body is a bit different from normal people's, so the process of undoing the seals is a bit scary. It'll be fine once the seals are completely removed. Setsuno knew Jiro's situation, so she explained it to the group. Hearing this, they finally let out a sigh of relief. It couldn't be helped, Jiro was too terrifying. Finally back to my full strength. I don't even remember how long it's been since I'd been in this state. Returning to his peak, Jiro had reverted to the stage of a young, strong man. At this moment, he and Teppei looked like brothers. Roar roar. Just as Jiro recovered, the appearances of Toriko and the others suddenly changed. Half of Toriko's body turned red, and ferocious spikes grew out. His teeth and eyes also changed. It was clear that his appetite demon had come out. It wasn't just him, half of Sunny also turned into the form of a hair demon, and Teppei turned into a plant body. Even Yasako's body changed. And Setsuno's body was radiating a pink light. The only one present who didn't change was Yuki, because he had no appetite demon. But he could also feel the terrifying aura emanating from Jiro. Perhaps because he had just returned to his peak, Jiro hadn't suppressed his aura in time. The appetite demons residing in their hosts, sensing this terrifying threat, immediately jumped out. They wouldn't let their hosts just die like that. At the same time, every person in the human world with a bit of strength sensed this terrifying aura. Whether human or beast, all who felt it froze on the spot. What is this presence? At IGO headquarters, Mansam was stunned when he sensed it. His body immediately entered a combat state. But because his strength was relatively high and he was far from the source, his appetite demon didn't come out. But this aura was too scary, which caused many people in the IGO to have stress reactions. Everyone, don't worry. It's not an enemy's aura. Just as they were in a panic, Ichiria's voice came. His voice was like a calming pillar. Hearing it, everyone let out a sigh of relief. Jiro has undone his seals? What could possibly make him do that in the human world? Ichiria was also completely baffled. He greeted Mansam and then headed directly towards the source of Jiro's aura. He needed to find out what was going on. On the other side, in the Gourmet Corp, the same scene was playing out. Midoriya's aura also erupted, covering the Gourmet Corp and preventing any problems. Though he was also very puzzled as to what was happening, he didn't rush over to check like Ichiryu. After all, his relationship with Ichiryu and Jiro wasn't great right now. Though he knew that if he were willing to go back, his two brothers would definitely accept him, when he thought of what he had done back then, he was unwilling to return. After all, in his eyes, Frozy had died because of him back then. His situation was somewhat similar to Azumi Nakiri's in Food Wars. It was clearly their own problem, but in the end, they were the ones who caused a series of incidents. Did you all come out because of my aura? Get back inside! Jiro roared. Instantly, the changes on Toriko and the others' bodies stopped. But each and every one of them collapsed to the ground, panting heavily. After all, though an appetite demon could help its host fight, the consumption was also very large. In the original story, Toriko had spent some time in the gourmet world and his strength had improved a lot. In the late stages of the story, after eating 6 or 7 of Acacia's full-course menu, he could barely support the red and blue demons fighting at the same time. The consumption of an appetite demon coming out was quite large. Yasako's situation was a bit better. Though the consumption was not small, he was a powerhouse who could enter the gourmet world, so he wasn't too affected. He just had some cold sweat on his forehead, all from being scared. Sorry. It's been a long time since I've been in this state, so it's hard to control. Jiro said with a grin. But at this moment, the way everyone looked at him had changed. This seemingly kind and amiable person, the aura he had just unleashed was not so kind and amiable. Jiro? Setsu? You're all here? What happened? Why did you undo your seals? At this moment, President Ichiryu also arrived. For people of their strength, the massive earth was like a back garden. Getting anywhere was quick. It's you, Ichiryu. Right, the aura just now must have alarmed you all. It's like this. Jiro told Ichiryu about Yuki's series of operations. After hearing it, Ichiryu fell silent. Because what Yuki had done was indeed a bit too unreal. Actually, Ichiryu's knocking proficiency had also reached a high level, but he hadn't learned damage knocking. Ichiryu, this human named Yuki, is truly unreal. To even think of such a method. At this moment, inside Ichiryu's body, Don Slime was also a bit baffled. It was hard to imagine that a human, and a teenager at that, could do such a thing. He is indeed unreal. Both the permanent food immersion and the ability to undo the damage of damage knocking, it seems you can also learn damage knocking now. Don Slime said. Before, damage knocking had a fatal flaw. But now, the sealed damage would automatically flow out. This was quite good. After a battle, you could rest for a while and then start a second one. And most critically, you wouldn't be injured and would always be in your peak state. And even if you accumulated too much damage, you could ask Yuki for help. It could be said that because of Yuki, the value of this move had become even higher. I'll ask about it later. But for now, let's see the results first. President Ichiryu didn't leave but waited there. After all, Jiro was his junior, someone he treated as a real brother. He naturally couldn't just leave now. Then let's begin. Release more damage. After Yuki spoke, Jiro nodded and stuck his finger directly into his mouth. So the weakness of damage knocking is in that place? Because they knew the effect of damage knocking, after seeing this scene, they also knew that this was the weak point. They never thought it would be in the mouth. As Jiro released the damage knocking, Yuki's hand also fiercely jabbed him. He performed a secondary knock to release more damage, but not all at once. If it were all released at once, Jiro would die. PSSH. The moment a large amount of damage was released, even Jiro's terrifyingly strong body was hit by a powerful impact. Blood spurted out from his body. It was a good thing this impact only acted on him. If it had acted on the outside world, the human world would probably be gone. Yuki's life energy was now continuously pouring into Jiro's body, repairing it. Soon, his body returned to its peak state. What a miraculous ability! That last one should have released a tenth of the damage. Repeat the process 10 times and it'll all be gone. Jiro said with a pleasant surprise. Though he had expected it, experiencing it himself was completely different. 10 times. Just 10 times and the only hidden danger on his body would be gone. Though he felt no one could undo his damage knocking, having such a hidden danger was naturally something he was very concerned about. In that case, let's continue. 10 times was no problem for Yuki. Though healing Jiro required a lot of life energy, he had made a large amount of preparations for this. The life energy in his hands wasn't just enough to heal Jiro 10 times, even 100 times would be no problem. For this, he had absorbed the life energy of a large number of creatures. It was a good thing this was the world of Toriko. If it were another world, even draining an entire world probably wouldn't be enough to heal Jiro so many times. 10 times passed quickly. The blood that had flowed out of Jiro had completely dyed the surroundings red. This scene, it was many times more than the blood that had flowed out of Zoro in the neighboring world when he had taken on Luffy's damage. Phew, it's finally over. 10 serious injuries. I've never experienced so many serious injuries at once. At this moment, Jiro also felt completely relaxed. After all, the hidden danger on his body was eliminated. Congratulations! Now you have no hidden dangers. And you can use this move as you please. But Yuki, your move is really something. To be able to heal Jiro's injuries so easily. Ichiryu was even more shocked by Yuki's methods. They were truly ridiculous. This is also a special ability of my appetite demon. But there's one more thing to say, and that's about the weakness of damage knocking. Before, the weakness was in your mouth. But now, you can move its location, move it to a place only you know. Yuki said. Damage knocking would still have a weakness, but moving it was enough. At that time, even if Acacia attacked his mouth, it wouldn't cause him to die. After all, in the final battle, Jiro had taken a lot of damage. Though all that damage erupting at once wouldn't necessarily kill him, it would definitely seriously injure him. So, moving the weakness was a must. And only he could know its location. Chapter 167, The Gourmet Knight Aimaru, The Ultimate Routine. Moving the weak point of damage knocking? You even figured that out? Master Jiro was even more floored. Since learning the technique, he had never once considered such a possibility. That's right. Honestly, Master Jiro, if you had focused on researching it yourself, you probably would have found a way. The only reason you never thought about it was because the weak point was already storing a massive amount of damage, making it impossible to move. Yuki explained. Jiro's talent for knocking was exceptional. If not for that critical flaw, he likely would have figured it out on his own. Even if you say that, moving the weak point isn't that simple. An advanced technique like damage knocking is a delicate system. Moving one piece is like changing the entire technique. Even if I could have figured it out, it would have taken a very long time. Jiro knew his own limits. Hearing Yuki's words didn't make him feel more powerful, on the contrary, it made him realize just how unreal Yuki was. This was a complete, full-service upgrade. Once he moved the weak point, even if he encountered someone else who knew the technique, it would no longer be a threat. Later, Yuki taught Jiro the method for moving the weak point. Where to move it was now entirely up to him. In Yuki's opinion, the best place would be in one of his limbs. The original weak point was in the mouth. You can't just cut off your own head, that would be a difficult thing to survive. But if it were moved to a limb, even if it were discovered and undone, he could just sever his own arm or leg in an instant and survive. After learning the method, Jiro didn't move it immediately. He decided to do it after he returned home. Yuki had specifically told him to find a private place to do it. A weakness like this should never be revealed to anyone. After all, in this world, there were plenty of ways to make someone talk. Jiro knew this, and the others didn't press the matter. They understood the importance of such a secret. So, no one, not even Setsuno, asked where he would move it. And with that, the matter was concluded. Yuki's studies in the land of healing had also come to an end. After returning to the city, the group held a celebratory dinner. What? Chef Yuki, you're going to find the Gourmet Knights? Hearing Yuki's plan, Toriko was taken aback. He was good friends with them, especially their leader, Imaru. You could even call them best friends. That's right. I'm very interested in one of their techniques, so I plan to ask for their guidance. Yuki nodded. You must be talking about their ultimate routine. Is that technique really useful to you now? President Ichiryu also knew of the Gourmet Knights and their ultimate routine. It was an interesting technique, but in his view, it was only useful in the human world. And Yuki was a master of food honor and enbu. The pressure Jiro had unleashed earlier had given him a taste of true mortal danger. As a result, his enbu had improved once again. Yuki estimated that it wouldn't be long before he reached a level second only to the Monkey King himself. It was true. Though Toriko and the others were basically walking cheat codes in the original story, the growth from a life-or-death crisis was immense. It was by experiencing this that Yuki had grasped a key point. He couldn't help but feel a little frustrated. If he had felt this kind of mortal danger earlier, his enbu would have probably reached its limit long ago. The boost from that technique is of little use to me. But the principle behind it is very interesting. A technique like that might be worth digging into. Yuki explained that the boost wasn't physical but mental. So he wanted to study it. Though it was a human world technique, that didn't mean it was useless. Hearing this, Ichiryu, Jiro, and Setsuno were all taken aback. If anyone else had said such a thing, they would have just laughed it off. The Gourmet Knights had developed that technique over countless generations to reach its current level. The difficulty of developing it further was imaginable. But thinking of Yuki's unreal talent, they felt it might be possible. Maybe he really could develop some special new technique from it. After all, just look at food immersion and damage knocking. Those two seemingly unrelated skills had been merged and made to complement each other by him. It was completely absurd. Before Yuki, they would have never believed anyone could do such a thing. But now, he had. In that case, I'll go with you. I'm also very interested in that technique. Toriko was also worried about Imaru's condition. Though he had given Takemaru a message, which would most likely convince Imaru to choose to live, there was a small chance it wouldn't. So, as a best friend, he had to go and see how he was doing. And he also wanted to learn the ultimate routine. It might be useful in the future. Then you and Yuki can go together. After you're done, remember to find these ingredients. With that, Ichirio gave Toriko a piece of paper. On it were written the ingredients that were suitable for his gourmet cells, all recommended by Don Slime. Don Slime wasn't an appetite demon from the Red Universe, so its power far surpassed them, and it knew a great deal about them. It knew exactly which ingredients were suitable for the Red Demon's gourmet cells. I understand. I'll go find them after this is over. Toriko nodded. By the way, Toriko, don't forget your little partner. He's waiting for you. Ichirio suddenly remembered Toriko's partner. Though they hadn't officially confirmed their partnership yet, Ichirio could see that at this rate, it was inevitable that Toriko and Komatsu would become partners. He had had someone look into Komatsu, and the results were very satisfactory. Though he wasn't a powerful chef right now, he was persistent. With a character like that, he couldn't be a bad person. So, Ichirio fully supported Toriko taking him on as a partner. Komatsu? He's not my partner yet. But I do have the idea of inviting him to be. Toriko also felt that Komatsu was a great guy, so he planned to ask him. In that case, you have to be responsible for his safety. Ichirio smiled and said no more. After the meal, those who had to leave, left, and those who had to rest, rested. Ichirio, Jiro, and Setsuno departed. They had their own things to do and wouldn't stay here forever. As for Yusaku, he called Sunny over. It was clear he was going to tell him something about Earth, but it probably wouldn't be much. After all, the Earth Sunny was looking for was in the gourmet world, in a place called the Cave of Old Age. Once you entered that cave, the flow of time would become 200,000 times faster than the outside world. And this time dilation didn't mean you would spend that much time in the cave, it was calculated based on the outside world's time flow. It was just that the physical condition of those inside would be accelerated by 200,000 times. That cave was extremely dangerous. Yusaku had been there a few times, and he had only solved the problem with the help of the local natives. His revival of the flower field hadn't just started now. After all, the delicacies of Earth needed time to mature, just like how the first-generation Milk had started preparing his knife. A few years ago, Yusaku had also begun the work of reviving the flower field. That was why he hadn't gone to the gourmet show window, but had sent Teppei instead. After all, if he had wanted to, he could have completely revived the gourmet show window. He hadn't gone because he had more important things to do. Reviving the flower field wasn't something that could be done overnight, it took time. So, Yusaku would intermittently travel to the gourmet world to work on it, returning to the human world to rest after completing each stage. The next morning, the group went their separate ways. Sunny had gotten some of the information he wanted. Though it wasn't much, he was still very happy. Toriko and Yuki headed for the Gourmet Knight's residence. As for Teppei, he had nothing else to do, so he chose to stay in the land of healing. Yuki and Toriko soon arrived at the Gourmet Knight's location. They lived in a somewhat dilapidated small village. Here, there was no advanced transportation, no luxurious housing. Everything was very primitive. Most critically, Yuki couldn't smell any ingredients here. These Gourmet Knights are really something. I don't know how they can resist eating all that delicious food. Yuki couldn't help but say, looking at the small village. Though he wasn't as gluttonous as Toriko, he would never pass up good food. These Gourmet Knights were like a group of ascetic monks. The key was that in this age of gourmet food, they basically didn't eat any of it. They were a very peculiar group of people. This is the creed of the Gourmet Knights. To be honest, I don't really understand it either. And that guy Aimaru was even more extreme than the others. Even if I ate all kinds of delicacies in front of him, he wouldn't have any reaction. Toriko shook his head. When he first met Aimaru, he had eaten a lot of delicious food in front of him. At first, he thought Aimaru was just pretending, that he was desperate to eat but was holding back. But after several attempts to tempt him, Toriko discovered that he was the shallow one. Aimaru's inner conviction was terrifyingly strong, and his willpower was incredibly firm. Once he set his mind on something, he would do it. So, Imaro never even had the thought of eating those delicacies. It was because of this that he and Imara had become friends, because he was also someone who said what he thought. Imaro never held back, and he never beat around the bush. "Isn't that Toriko? What are you doing here? And who is this?" As soon as they arrived at the village entrance, they ran into Imaro, who was out for a stroll. His body had recovered a lot, but he was still a bit weak, so his movements looked a bit stiff. "Imaru? You look a lot better. It seems the message I had that little Dai Takamara bring you worked." Seeing Imaru's condition, Toriko smiled. He had heard from Takamaro that he had been on the verge of death, but now he was able to walk. This meant his message had been effective. "I didn't want to take that medicine. But the news you brought was too important. I have a feeling that I might be of some use at that time, so I took it." Imara had originally planned to follow the rules of nature and just die. But upon hearing the news Toriko had brought, he had a premonition that he was important, that he still had things to do. He couldn't die yet. Actually, this feeling of his was food luck at work. In the original story, Imaru did play a significant role, especially in leading the way and finally pulling Teppei into Area Zero. It was because he was there that Teppei was pulled in. Otherwise, even if they had one in the original story, the Earth would have been gone. At that time, the Earth was on the verge of collapse. That final knock was extremely important. That news is true. I also heard it from the old man. By the way, let me introduce you. This is Chef Yuki. Toriko introduced Yuki to him. I can see your body hasn't fully recovered. Though you took Yasako-sensei's medicine, its effects can't completely heal you, Yuki said, looking at Imaru's body. He could clearly sense that his body was very weak. Logically, if he had truly recovered, he wouldn't still be walking like this after so long. Imaru's body was still severely depleted. So, even if the previous medicine had been effective, it couldn't restore him to his peak state. You saw right through me. You're really amazing, Chef Yuki. But this is enough. As long as I can live until that time and be of some use, that's all that matters. Imaru was very philosophical about it. Even if he wasn't completely healed, it wasn't a problem. All he needed now was to live until that time. You won't be able to help much in your current state. Let me give you a hand. With that, Yuki directly injected a stream of life energy into Imaru's body, repairing it. After all, he was going to learn their techniques later, so he had to show his goodwill. Chapter 168, An Unyielding Conviction, The Seeds of Reality from Illusion. This is, my body, it's recovered. As the life energy poured into him, Imaru could clearly feel his body rapidly healing. The body that could barely move just a moment ago was restored to its peak state in the blink of an eye. After all, Yuki's life energy could even heal Master Jiro's injuries. Imaru was nothing in comparison. Amazing, right? This is Chef Yuki's exclusive technique. You really lucked out this time, Imaru. Seeing his best friend return to full health, Toriko was very happy. It is truly amazing. To restore my severely depleted body to its peak in an instant. Thank you so much, Chef Yuki. Imaru also thanked him. Since he had decided to continue living, he naturally wanted his body to be in a healthy state. But his body had been too depleted, so he hadn't been able to recover in a short time. Even in the late stages of the original story, he was still in a sickly state. Don't thank me, Mr. Imaru. After all, I came here with a purpose, the ultimate routine. Yuki said. He was here for the Gourmet Nights technique. The ultimate routine? If you're interested, Chef Yuki, I can certainly teach you. It's just that it might be a bit difficult to learn. Imaru explained. Yuki had come with Toriko and had helped him so much, so he wouldn't refuse. It was just that the technique was a bit difficult. Don't be fooled by the fact that in the original story, both Toriko and Star June learned it in an instant. Those two were not normal people. Their learning ability was off the charts, and most critically, both of them were extremely confident in themselves. Extreme confidence was the key to this technique. After all, it was a skill on a mental level. Aimaru, don't underestimate Chef Yuki. His learning ability is not something most can compare to. Toriko laughed. Having spent some time in the land of healing, he knew just how ridiculous Yuki was. In a few months, he had gone from a reviver novice to a super reviver on par with Yasaku. An ultimate routine. Toriko didn't think this skill could stump him. In that case, let's go inside first. I will teach you this technique later. Aimaru nodded. Teaching one person was the same as teaching two. Toriko was his best friend, and the reason he had decided to live was because of the message Toriko had sent with Takemaru. It could be said that Toriko was one of the people who understood him best. That was why he knew that bringing this news would make him choose to live. Aimaru was very grateful to him. He would naturally teach him this technique as well. Of course, that was on the condition that he could learn it. If he couldn't, there was nothing Aimaru could do. Upon entering the village, Yuki and Toriko met the other gourmet knights. This group was very small. After all, very few people could endure such a life. But those who could persist were all beings with incredibly firm wills. When they saw Aimaru's body had recovered, they were all very surprised and then very grateful to Yuki. After all, Aimaru was their leader, their spiritual anchor. If he had died, though the gourmet knights wouldn't have disbanded, they would have been in a bad state. So, by helping Aimaru, Yuki had helped all of them. But the gourmet knights couldn't offer anything to entertain Yuki and Toriko. It couldn't be helped, they were a group of ascetic monks who never indulged in worldly pleasures. Everything in this village was very primitive. In the end, Toriko and Yuki had to go into the forest to hunt for themselves. I really admire you gourmet knights. I don't know how you can resist eating all this delicious food. In the forest, Toriko and Yuki were eating roasted meat. As for Aimaru, he was sitting on the side with a smile, his gaze never leaving them. But there wasn't a trace of desire in his eyes. A person who could control their desires so well was destined for great things. A pity that he was born in this era. In this era, the main theme would always be gourmet food. After all, gourmet cells were the key. So, though his spirit was strong, he was destined not to go far in the future. This is the principle of us gourmet knights. Now, while you eat, I will explain the ultimate routine. Just talking about it might be hard for you to understand. So, I'll use it once. But because I usually eat very little, using it once will require me to rest for several months. So this opportunity is very precious. You must watch carefully. As he spoke, Aimaru suddenly activated the ultimate routine. Normally, when the gourmet knights used their techniques, they had to perform a set of movements beforehand. Takemaru had done so in the ice hell in the original story. The reason for these movements was to forcibly increase their concentration. This was actually somewhat similar to food honor. The effect of food honor was to use less strength to produce a stronger effect, also a technique to enhance concentration. The gourmet knights also followed this process, but the ultimate routine was different. It didn't need any prerequisites. It was an ability of pure will. The next second after Aimaru spoke, both Yuki and Toriko saw an image of themselves being corroded. The moment this image appeared, Yuki didn't move, but Toriko instantly flashed dozens of meters away, creating distance between himself and Aimaru. A few drops of sweat dripped from Toriko's forehead. In that instant, he felt he was about to die. It wasn't an illusion, Toriko. If you hadn't moved just now, you would have really died. Actually, it wasn't just you, every living thing in this entire forest saw that image just now. But there was one exception. Chef Yuki, why weren't you affected? Aimaru looked at Yuki with confusion. He was puzzled. His ultimate routine shouldn't have failed. Toriko and the animals that had already fled were the best proof. No, I was affected. But Imaro, the gap between your strength and mine is a bit too large. So, though your technique was effective on me, you couldn't hurt me. Even if you went all out, Yuki said. Hearing this, Imaro understood. He had used the ultimate routine to make them feel his strongest attack. This attack could undoubtedly kill Toriko, but it couldn't harm Yuki. But since you were also affected, you should have felt that feeling just now, right? Imaro said. Though Yuki was strong, since he was affected, there was no problem. He was actually worried that Yuki wouldn't be affected at all. If that had happened, he would have been at a loss. After all, this technique was difficult to grasp just by explaining it. So, Imaro, what was that just now? Why did I see a scene of myself being corroded by the mold in your body when you clearly didn't do anything? Toriko couldn't wait to ask his question. He knew the Gourmet Knights very well, so he knew they had to perform a set of movements before fighting. After completing these movements, their combat power would increase. But he was confused because Imaro had clearly done nothing. No, I did, Toriko. I have already completed all the movements of the ultimate routine. However, Imaro decisively refuted Toriko's statement. Impossible. You were just sitting there and didn't do anything. Chef Yuki saw it too. Toriko insisted his eyes couldn't have been mistaken. Imaro had indeed done nothing. No, Toriko. Actually, Imaro did perform the movements. You just didn't notice. However, Yuki's one sentence made Toriko's brain short-circuit. Imaro was also stunned for a moment, and then he understood. Yuki had realized the key to this technique. At this moment, he was also very shocked. He never thought that Yuki could understand the principle so easily just by feeling the effect of the technique, and even cooperate with him to fool Toriko. What? When did he do it? Hearing Yuki's words, Toriko chose to believe him. He didn't think Yuki would lie to him about this, and there was no need to. Toriko, I was wrong. I didn't perform those movements just now. However, just as Toriko was believing him, Imaro said something that made him even more confused. What do you mean, Imaro? What are you guys playing at? Toriko suddenly felt like he was being played with. At this moment, he felt his brain wasn't enough. Toriko, why did you believe what I said just now? However, Imaro didn't say much more, but asked him a new question. Why did I believe you? It was because you said it with such conviction. And Chef Yuki was backing you up. Of course, I would believe you. Toriko said his thoughts. So even if you doubted it yourself, you chose to believe because of our attitude, right? You should have realized by now. You didn't make the decision after confirming it yourself. You were influenced by me and Chef Yuki, so in the end, you chose to believe. This is the core of the ultimate routine. As long as you have a strong enough conviction, and you force yourself to believe, you can do it. Just like how you saw yourself being corroded by my mold just now. My technique normally isn't enough to kill you. But just now, I possessed the conviction to kill you. This conviction was incredibly powerful, so much so that it even affected reality. So, do you understand? Imaro began to explain the core of this technique. After listening, Yuki also understood. This technique was more like a form of hypnosis. But during the hypnosis, an incredibly powerful conviction began to affect reality. Actually, even before he transmigrated, or in the world of Food Wars, there were similar examples. The simplest example was illness. Many illnesses were caused by one's own emotions. Logically, emotional changes were mental changes and should not affect the body. But emotional changes were closely related to the body. So, when a person was extremely sad or angry, their body would often have some problems. Yuki had even heard of some cases of cancer. Medically, they had been defined as a death sentence. Most people, after knowing they had cancer and there was no cure, would feel they were doomed and live in a state of extreme pessimism every day. But there were a very small number of people who shifted their attention to other things. In the end, even if they had been medically sentenced to death, their bodies still recovered. This change was very magical, no one could explain it. But in the world of Toriko, because of the existence of gourmet cells, the conviction of the ultimate routine was materialized. It allowed something that was originally illusory to have a chance to become real. It could be said that the ultimate routine that Imaro and the Gourmet Knights had researched already had the seeds of turning illusion into reality. Perhaps because of the limitations of their strength, they could only simply apply it to their own bodies. For example, Imaro, to explain the key of the ultimate routine to Toriko, had used his conviction to give himself a stomach ulcer. He hadn't used his mold ability. He had purely relied on his conviction to make his body believe he had a stomach ulcer. The appearance of this scene made Toriko feel his worldview had collapsed. He couldn't imagine what kind of willpower could cause such a thing. A technique very similar to food honor, a clear mind, absolute belief in oneself. At this moment, Yuki began to try. And the result of his attempt soon appeared. His hair, under the watchful eyes of the two, directly grew by about 10 centimeters. Phew! Is this the limit of what I can do now? Looking at his longer hair, Yuki was a bit emotional. What happened? Chef Yuki, why did your hair suddenly grow longer? Toriko asked, completely baffled. Toriko, don't you already have the answer in your heart? This is the ultimate routine. I've already mastered this technique. I purely relied on my conviction to make my hair grow longer. But the limit of what I can do is to make my hair grow 10 centimeters. Any more than that is impossible. Yuki said that he had just mastered this technique, so this was his limit. Chapter 169, Will Empower in Harmony, an Epiphany for Imaro. Hearing Yuki's words, Toriko fell silent. He had, in fact, already guessed why Yuki's hair had grown, but he still couldn't quite accept it. How could mere belief accomplish such a thing? Toriko, don't fall into self-doubt. Remember, only when you believe strongly enough can you make it a reality. Seeing Toriko's confusion, Imaro immediately spoke up to remind him. The greatest enemy of the ultimate routine was self-doubt. The moment you succumbed to it, the technique would crumble. In truth, Imaro himself was completely shocked. Yuki's feat was unreal. While he could use the powerful conviction of the ultimate routine to give himself a stomach ulcer, he couldn't make his own hair grow on command. Imaro was baffled. He never knew the ultimate routine could be used for something like this. But he also knew he couldn't allow himself to doubt. He still had to teach Toriko, after all. Toriko, have you heard of the 8 kings of the gourmet world? Just as Toriko was lost in his thoughts, Yuki spoke. The 8 kings? The rulers of the 8 continents of the gourmet world, right? I know a little about them, but only the basics. Why bring them up? Toriko asked, confused. Imaro was just as puzzled. He had never been to the gourmet world, so there were many things he didn't know. In the gourmet world, the division between day and night is different. What they call night is when the 8 kings are on the move. Yuki's words left both of them stunned. The movements of the 8 kings are defined as night? Why? Toriko asked, completely baffled. Because the emotional changes of the 8 kings can affect reality itself. When they are in a good mood, the lands they pass through become incredibly fertile, the ecosystem flourishes, and it becomes a paradise for all living things. But conversely, if they are in a bad mood, wherever they go, not a single blade of grass will grow. Everything turns to wasteland. The 8 kings don't intentionally affect the environment, but their emotions can do so inadvertently. It is this uncertainty that makes their every journey incredibly dangerous. That is why it is called the night of the gourmet world. Yuki explained how the 8 kings could alter the natural world with their emotions alone. So this is also a form of powerful conviction? What kind of unyielding belief would it take to do something like that? Imaro understood in an instant. The 8 kings' emotions influencing nature, this was the very concept of the ultimate routine. But according to Yuki, they weren't even consciously controlling it. If his ultimate routine was an active skill, then the Eight Kings was a passive one. They did it without even trying. Imaro couldn't imagine what kind of overwhelming will it would take to achieve such a state. Imaro, you're mistaken about one thing. It's not just about will. Yuki shook his head. While similar examples existed in the real world, no matter how strong one's will was, it could never turn illusion into reality. Take his hair growth. In the real world, you could never will your hair to grow longer. But extreme grief could turn it white overnight. What do you mean by that, Chef Yuki? Imaro asked, not understanding. Can you do what I just did, Imaro? Make your own hair grow. Yuki didn't answer directly but posed another question. I can't. Though I know you used your powerful willpower to make your hair grow, I can't do it. Imaro shook his head. You can't? How is that possible? Even if Chef Yuki has learned the ultimate routine, there's no way he could have surpassed you in an instant, right, Imaro? Toriko was even more confused. He knew Yuki was a monster, but not to this extent. That's right, Toriko. Imaro is correct. I've only just learned this technique. My willpower is not stronger than his. The willpower of you gourmet knights has been forged to an incredible degree by your lifestyle. I can't compare to that. Yuki readily admitted it. Willpower needed to be tempered. He didn't think for a second that he could compete with these ascetic monks in that regard. You can't compare to me? But then why can you do such a thing, Chef Yuki? Imaro was also lost. He suddenly felt that his understanding of the ultimate routine was far too shallow. The reason is simple, Imaro. You've gone down a skewed path. A strong will can indeed accomplish some things, but your own physical strength is just as crucial. If you want to change reality with your will, you need to have enough power to change reality in the first place. Otherwise, it's all just a castle in the sky. Yuki explained. He had discovered the true key to this technique. It wasn't just willpower, it was the immense power brought by gourmet cells. Gourmet cells were the foundation of this world that was undeniable. A powerful will, combined with immense power, only then could you truly turn illusion into reality. This was the conclusion he had reached after considering the Eight Kings and his own situation. The reason he could do what Imaro couldn't wasn't because his willpower was stronger, but because his physical power was worlds beyond Imaro's. The strength of the gourmet knights was actually quite average. Because they didn't eat good food, and the improvement of gourmet cells required eating, the fact that they had reached their current level of combat power was already incredible. A strong will needs to be supported by immense power? So you're saying? Hearing Yuki's words, and thinking about how he had done what he couldn't, Imaro began to fall into a spiral of doubt. He started to question if the path of the gourmet knights had been wrong all along. Don't fall into self-doubt, Imaro. Those were the words you used to advise Toriko. Now you must apply them to yourself. Seeing his state, Yuki immediately spoke up to remind him. He didn't want to completely shatter the man's resolve. Hiss. Hearing Yuki's words, Imaro immediately snapped out of it. Thinking back to the moment he had been trapped in self-doubt, he couldn't help but suck in a cold breath. Actually, the path of you gourmet knights is not wrong. Imaro, you should know very well how much willpower is required to achieve the ultimate routine. Among all of you, very few can do it. It's true that a strong will needs to be supported by immense power. But Imaro, have you ever thought about this? If you didn't live like ascetic monks, how would you have trained such powerful wills? Yuki's one question left Imaro speechless. That was right. The gourmet knights' immense willpower, and the development of the ultimate routine was all because they had walked the path of ascetics. If they hadn't, then there would likely be no such thing as the ultimate routine. Not everyone could reach the level of the Eight Kings. Human lifespans were limited. Even the Eight Kings that were replaced from time to time lived for thousands or tens of thousands of years. Such a long lifespan had tempered their wills to be incredibly strong and resilient. But humans couldn't replicate that. The strongest humans now, Acacia students and Acacia, had only lived for a few hundred years. So, it wasn't that they had taken the wrong path, it was that they couldn't have both. And the origin of the Gourmet Knights wasn't that they had chosen this path from the beginning. The human world of the past wasn't as wonderful as it was now. Hundreds of years ago, because of the wars, in what should have been an age of gourmet food, food was scarce, and many starved to death. The Gourmet Knights had existed back then. Because of the famine, they had been forced to choose the path of ascetics. Now, though they were in an age of gourmet food and there was no shortage of food, the traditions of the past had been passed down. The birth of the Gourmet Knights was an accident, but the result of that accident was good. Just like in the past, when someone was reluctant to throw away spoiled tofu and ended up creating stinky tofu, accidents don't always lead to negative outcomes. Sometimes, they can be positive. The Gourmet Knights of today were the same. Without that accident of the past, there would be no ultimate routine now. Immense willpower and immense power, it's truly a difficult choice. I'm sorry, both of you, to have you see me like this. I was supposed to be the one teaching you, but now I'm the one who needs to be looked after. Imaro couldn't help but laugh at himself. You can't say that, Imaro. A person is always learning. No matter what field, no matter what level you've reached, there will always be areas you're not good at, areas you need to learn. It's impossible for a person to be perfect. Yuki shook his head. How could anyone be perfect? Even a cheat player like him wouldn't dare to claim that. Under Yuki's persuasion, Imaro gradually recovered. Toriko, do you have any other questions? Imaro asked. He didn't need to worry about Yuki. He had already mastered the ultimate routine, and Imaro felt that he would surely be able to perfect this technique even further. Now, the only one who needed attention was Toriko. I think I roughly understand it. But it's not so simple to actually do it. I'll need some time to slowly master this technique. Toriko nodded. He understood the technique, but he hadn't learned it instantly. The reason was simple. Both he and Starjun had been able to learn it in an instant because their food honor had already reached the master level. Food honor and the ultimate routine had many similarities. The current Toriko hadn't even started food honor, so he was a bit lost when faced with this. But with his willpower, though he couldn't learn it instantly now, he could still master it with some time. And after mastering it, it would also help him learn food honor later. He would learn it much faster, so spending time on this technique wasn't a waste. As long as you understand. And thank you so much this time, Chef Yuki. You've shown us a new path, though we may not necessarily walk it. Imaro said. Yuki had pointed out the path of supporting a strong will with immense power. Though Imaro felt he probably wouldn't take it, it left a choice for the future Gourmet Knights. They could first temper their willpower. After learning this technique, they could then improve their strength. That way, they could also continuously improve the ultimate routine. At this moment, Imaro felt as if he had seen a brand new path, his eyes filled with light. Actually, Imaro, there is another path you can take. Yuki suddenly said. Imaro's attitude had already shown that he wouldn't take the path of strengthening his gourmet cells. But Yuki felt there was another way to try. Another path? What is it? Hearing this, Imaro's eyes lit up again. The inspiration Yuki had brought him was very useful, so now that he said this, he didn't have a shred of doubt. Don't get your hopes up too high, Imaro. This is just a theory of mine. Yuki shook his head. He wasn't trying to fool him, it was an idea that had just come to him. A theory? Whether it's correct or not, we'll know once we test it. Please speak, Chef Yuki. Imaro said that whether it was a theory or not didn't matter. As long as they tested it, they would get an answer. Toriko also pricked up his ears. He knew the gap between himself and Yuki, so he didn't feel there was any problem with learning from him. The theory Yuki was about to present might be very useful to him as well, so he planned to listen carefully. In the gourmet world, on the sixth continent, there is a gate to the world of souls. The world of souls is a strange space, separate from the real world. After humans and various ingredients die, they all go to the world of souls. There, the flow of time is different. 100 years in the world of souls is but a moment in the outside world. The souls that enter the world of souls will be slowly worn away. In this process, the soul will gradually forget who it is, gradually lose its form, and eventually disappear. But conversely, while the vast majority of souls can't hold on and are worn away, there is a portion of souls that are very powerful. In this process of being worn away, they might forget who they are, but they can survive. And on the sixth continent, powerful food spirits can even seize the bodies of others and be revived in a different way. Yuki told the two of them about the world of souls. Chapter 170, Yuki's Theory, The Path of a Strong Soul. Chef Yuki, are you saying we get stronger after we die? Toriko asked with confusion. Let me finish. Though the world of souls is the world of the dead, the fish dish from Acacia's full-course menu, another, is in there. This means that the living can also enter the world of souls. It just requires some special methods. By using these methods, you can enter the world of souls, strengthen your soul, strengthen your willpower, and thus break free from the limitations of physical power. This is a very unorthodox method, and its difficulty is so high that almost no one can walk this path. Yuki shook his head. No matter how strong a soul was, if it stayed in the world of souls for too long, there would be problems. It was just a matter of sooner or later. To use time to temper one's will, to walk the path of strengthening the soul? This might actually be feasible. After listening, Aimaru felt that there shouldn't be any major problems. It was just that this unorthodox path would require much more time and energy than the normal path. And the difficulty could be imagined. After all, so many powerful souls had eventually forgotten who they were. But the living had one advantage: they could leave the world of souls at any time. As long as they made sure to come out before they got lost. Anyway, I've told you my theory. Whether you're willing to test it or not is up to you. Yuki said that he had only proposed this theory. He himself wouldn't walk this path. After all, he wasn't a gourmet knight, he naturally wouldn't give up immense power. But he would also go to the world of souls. Besides another being there, the most critical thing was that he wanted to temper his own will there. He knew very well that his will wasn't particularly strong. He hadn't experienced that much. Though he was much stronger than his peers, compared to those who had lived for hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of years, he was far behind. The special time flow of the world of souls would be very useful for him. An incredibly strong body, paired with an incredibly strong will. Yuki felt he could completely use illusion to shake reality. The ultimate routine was just a prototype. He would continue to develop this ability. After finishing his theory, Yuki and Toriko soon parted ways with Aimaru. After all, there was nothing here, there was nothing to entertain guests with, so they chose not to stay. Toriko still had the tasks President Ichirio had left him, to acquire various ingredients. As for Yuki, he also had a new goal. The four beasts had yet to come to the human world. He planned to take a trip to the old Biotope one first. With his current strength, dealing with the Wolf-Fire Dragon and Jirim should be no problem. Though the Wolf-Fire Dragon was on par with the Battle Wolf, it had been sealed for a long time, and its strength had been severely damaged. In the original story, the combined attack of the four heavenly kings could injure it and make it lose its ability to resist. Yuki was confident he could do the same. As for Jirim, he couldn't even find him now. And even if he did, Yuki wasn't afraid. As long as he didn't eat the Wolf-Fire Dragon, Jirim's strength wouldn't pose any threat to him. In the original story, Jirim wasn't much stronger than the Wolf-Fire Dragon. Otherwise, he wouldn't have let the four heavenly kings beat it until it couldn't fight back before eating it. After all, the IGO and the Gourmet Corp were watching outside. And he had betrayed the Gourmet Corp. They would definitely not let him go. So, he had no time to waste. The only choice was to eat the Wolf-Fire Dragon as soon as possible and get stronger so he could deal with the people from the Gourmet Corp. But he chose to let the four heavenly kings fight, a classic case of sitting back and reaping the rewards. So, with his current strength, Yuki didn't need to worry about him. And in the old Biotope 1, there were ingredients he hadn't eaten yet, the Corona Sunflower and the Wolf Fire Dragon. He didn't think the Corona Sunflower would give Toriko the same kind of explosive power-up as in the original story, but its effects certainly wouldn't be bad. After collecting these two ingredients, he would then take a trip to the Food Honor Temple to get the soap bubble fruit, and he could also have a meal at the Disappearing Cuisine restaurant along the way. But before going to the old Biotope 1, he had to find Setsuno. The reason was simple. In the old Biotope 10, there was an old acquaintance of hers, Granny Iam, who was working as a forest ranger. Though with his strength, he didn't need to care about her, she was still with the IGO and a good friend of Setsuno's. So, it was best to tell her, and also ask if she had any messages to bring. A few days later, Yuki returned to Gourmet Town and found Setsuno, telling her his plan. "You're also interested in Acacia-sama's hidden menu? That thing is just a rumor. He didn't leave any hidden menu. But the Corona Sunflower is a good thing. You can eat some, it'll be good for you," Setsuno said after hearing his plan. Yuki naturally knew what was going on. The so-called hidden menu was actually the giant grill that Komatsu had activated. As for the Wolf Fire Dragon, it was because the species was on the verge of extinction, so the Red Nitro had captured the last one and placed it in the old Biotope 1, probably as a collector's item. Speaking of which, I haven't seen Iam in a long time. "Would you mind if I came with you this time?" Setsuno said with a smile. She also wanted to see her old friend. To be honest, if he hadn't mentioned it, she would have forgotten about her. After all, they were all very old. She wasn't even sure if Granny Iam was still alive. Since Yuki had brought her up, she might as well go with him. "That's no problem at all. Let's go together." Yuki said it was fine. He was just going for the ingredients, and Setsuno wouldn't fight him for them, so it was no problem for her to come along. "No, you come with us too. Leave the company matters to someone else for now. You can't always be doing this work," Setsuno said. Though Nono's work ability was indeed very strong, she was her apprentice. She couldn't always focus her main energy on the company. More importantly, she had to hone her culinary skills. And when she had time, she should also go out and broaden her horizons. That way, her path in the future would be wider. Hearing this, Nono naturally nodded immediately. These were her master's words, she would surely listen. Setsuno then also prepared some ingredients, ones that didn't exist in the old Biotope 1, and some daily necessities. Without a doubt, these were for Granny Iam. After all, because of its unique geographical location, the old Biotope 1 was basically completely isolated from the outside world. Granny Iam was living almost like a primitive person there. That was why she was thinking of bringing some daily necessities over. "Master, where is the old Biotope 1? After boarding the camping monster, Nono couldn't help but ask. The IGO had multiple biotopes. The current Biotope 1 was the IGO headquarters, but she had never heard of an old one. The so-called old Biotope 1 is also known as Acacia's Kitchen. It was first discovered by Teacher Acacia. When the IGO was first established, Ichiryu originally planned to place the headquarters there. But after trying, he gave up. After all, the beasts there are very strong. There are even quite a few that can survive in the gourmet world. Ichiryu himself wasn't afraid, but the others couldn't handle it. In the end, the old Biotope 1 was abandoned, and a new one was created. The IGO headquarters was then established in the new Biotope 1. Setsuno explains simply. "There's a place like that in the human world?" Hearing her, Nono was completely shocked. The reason the human world was called the human world was because it was very safe compared to the gourmet world. If it weren't for the powerhouses here, the human world would have been destroyed by beasts from the gourmet world long ago. The old Biotope 1 was clearly in the human world, but it had beasts that could survive in the gourmet world. That meant their strength exceeded level 100. There are some special areas in the human world. The most typical examples are the 7 gourmet wonders. The place we're going this time is one of them, the Hungry Triangle. Setsuno said. After listening, Nono also understood. Each of the 7 gourmet wonders was magnificent, but also very dangerous. Especially the Hungry Triangle. Because of its location near the seas of the gourmet world, it wasn't hard to understand why beasts from there would appear. Just like the harbor of evil spirits, one of the 3 entrances to the gourmet world from the human world. Because it was connected to the oceans of the gourmet world, it led to many marine creatures from there entering the human world. But these marine creatures wouldn't go deep into the human world because the environment here wasn't suitable for their survival. It was like taking someone who had been using high-tech equipment for thousands of years and suddenly throwing them into the wilderness to survive. The environment of the human world was very harsh for these beasts from the gourmet world, so they naturally wouldn't go deep into it. Under Setsuno's explanation, the 3 of them soon arrived at the outskirts of their destination. In the original story, others didn't know where the old biotope one was, so Jirim and the others needed the Infinabi to lead the way. But the higher-ups of the IGO knew where it was. After all, the IGO's past headquarters had almost been set up there. The technology of these Nitro is very advanced. To be able to maintain this man-made super-large ice tornado to this day. Looking at the Hungry Triangle wrapped in front of them, Yuki said. The surroundings of the Hungry Triangle were wrapped in a terrifying tornado with a thickness of over a kilometer. This was why the ships and planes that got close would disappear. Once you were sucked in, you couldn't get out without sufficient strength. This tornado was clearly man-made, created by the Red Nitro with special technology. As for whether it was created with their strength. To be honest, he really didn't believe the Red Nitro could do that. Above the 6th continent, there was a permanent mother tornado, but that was left by one of the 8 kings, the Snake King. The destruction caused by the 8 kings was terrifying. But these Red Nitro clearly couldn't reach that level. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been enslaved by the Blue Nitro, who were weaker than the 8 kings. The Nitro were appetite. Though they had endless lifespans, in return, their strength was locked. There was no possibility of further improvement. After all, it's a civilization that has existed for who knows how many years. Though it was destroyed. Their technology is indeed something we humans cannot match. In fact, much of human technology now has been developed based on Nitro technology. Setsuno said. Yuki fully agreed. The reason human technology in the world of Toriko was so advanced was, besides their own efforts, also due to the help of Nitro technology. The jellyfish camping monster charged directly into the tornado. Upon entering, the group also saw many beasts that had been swept into the air. These beasts were also part of the defense line, to prevent foreign enemies from invading. Among them were some marine beasts from the gourmet world. But now, the people on the jellyfish camping monster were Yuki and Setsuno. Only Nono was a bit weaker, but not by much. She was Setsuno's apprentice, after all, and her food honor had already reached the master level. It was just that as a chef, she was at a bit of a disadvantage in terms of cell level compared to a gourmet hunter. In the original story, the strength of Yuta and the others was very average. Among the chefs, the only ones with relatively strong strength were a few like Setsuno, Chio, and Zaz. That wraps up this part of What If Fishing System in Food Wars World. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Also check out my Patreon channel for early releases of all the series, where you can find all the series released one day ahead of YouTube. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.